Brought to you by JMR Rentals, professional digital cinema and broadcast equipment rentals in Brooklyn, New York. JMRNY.com. And now get 15% off your first rental when you use the promo code WEEKEND. Call 347-721-3400 or email info@jmrny.com for details. Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators of independent entertainment. I'm Jason Godbey, and today on the program we got some more movie reviews, continued from our last discussion back with Maribeth Thueson, here to talk to me via Zoom. Maribeth, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, it's great to be back.
It's great to have you back. We got some more movies. We talked so long about Dune last time that we did not get to The Last Duel. So I want to talk about that. There's some other movies that we have to talk about. Now we've got what looks to me like a actor extravaganza, complete Oscar bait movie directed by Ridley Scott, The Last Duel. What can you tell us about it?
Oh, you might be right about that. So the story is that this guy, Jean-Luc, I think it's Carouge, who's played by Matt Damon, and Jacques Legris, who's played by Adam Driver, are friends. And they are both squires. They go into battle together. This is during the 100 Years' War. And they both serve a lord who is played by Ben Affleck. In the battle, Carouge saves Legris' life. Legris later becomes godfather to Carouge's son. They're very close relationship. At some point, they start growing apart. Carouge continues to be a warrior. He's eventually knighted, whereas Legris starts serving the Lord more in an administrative function, and he starts getting favors from this Lord, and Carouge becomes jealous of those favors. In particular, there's a piece of land and an appointment that he felt he should have gotten that Legris ends up with. So there's a split between them. Carouge then marries a young woman named Marguerite, who is an heiress, and he thinks that her money will help him restore his fortune. At one point, they are at a function where Legris is there, and so he tries to mend fences a little bit. He says, he introduces the two of them, and he says to her, oh, kiss him to show that we have no hard feelings. It's sort of a kiss of peace. And that's what starts off the rest of the bad part of the story, because you see the events from each of the three characters' points of view. So when you see it from Matt Damon's point of view, that's no big deal. When you see it from Adam Driver's point of view, the kiss is something that he inflames him and that he thinks that she's responding to. When you see it from her point of view, you see that she sees that he has this reaction and she's like, what is going on here? What is that all about? I didn't mean it that way, you know? And so Legris thinks that he is madly in love with her. And so he understands that Carouge is going off on a battle. He goes to her house. It happens to be the day that her mother-in-law, Carouge's mother, decides to go into town with all the servants on an errand. And so she's there alone. And he tricks his way in and he rapes her. And that, of course, is shown from both points of view as well. We can talk about that later. And unlike most women, he tells her, in fact, don't tell anybody or I'll kill you. And she does. She tells her husband when he comes home, and together they decide that they're going to pursue justice for this wrong. And so they tell everyone that they know, all their family and friends. They say, spread the word. And they go to the Lord, who has, played by Matt Damon, who has the jurisdiction. And the Lord dismisses it altogether and says, oh, you know, she was probably dreaming it, right? Blame the woman, it's her fault. And so they're not satisfied with that. So they decide to appeal to the King of France. And that means they have to go before a court in the city of Paris. So they do. They go and they give their testimony. Her testimony is still there. It's in an original document in the library someplace. You can find it. And it comes down to he said, she said, and the court can't decide. So they do trial by combat. So in the medieval line, this was the trial by combat shows who God favors, and whoever that is, whoever wins, they have the truth on their side. And people say, well, was she telling the truth? Well, the consequences for her husband loses the duel, that she is burned alive at the stake. So why would she? First of all, you know, in our time, how hard it is for a woman to bring an accusation like this, and the kind of condemnation that is heaped upon her. Think about how much worse it was then. And then, if you're proven wrong in court, you have to be burned at the stake. Come on, she wasn't lying.
The one thing, after reading your review, because I haven't seen the film, but after reading your review, one question I had is any of that messaging heavy-handed at times? Like, do you kind of feel the messaging, or is it more, so is that more your interpretation, or is the movie kind of shoving your face in it, so to speak?
No, I don't think it is. I think there are a couple of times when there are messaging, and that is with a couple of judges at the trial. One judge says, they make a point of the medieval belief, and this is an actual medieval belief, is that you can't get pregnant, a woman can't get pregnant unless she is experiencing pleasure in the sex act, right? So they questioned her about that. Did you feel pleasure when he raped you? And you should see her face when they say that. The other moment is when a judge says, you can't get pregnant when you're raped. That's science. And of course, that gets a bit of a laugh because there are still people putting that idea out there, which is absolute nonsense. So those would be the two times I think that there's a little messaging going on. But the rest of it it's all in the narrative. It's all in the actions between the three characters. It's all in the emotions that they have. They're in their reactions to each other. So yeah, it's not really a message film, although the message is there.
Ridley Scott is a great director. He's directed some wonderful things. We mentioned Blade Runner in our last review, talking about Denis Villeneuve in 2049. And, of course, he was the guy behind that. He's the guy behind Alien. And then probably the closest thing that he's done to this would be like Duelist or Gladiator. Gladiator had a lot of crazy, phonetic, quick cutting, eye blink, stabbing, and things like that. Is this a similar style, or is the violence kind of more, is it calmed down a bit?
I would say it's like that during the actual duel. I mean, it's a long, bloody, violent fight scene. And there is that quick cutting, there's overhead shots, there's that kind of thing. But that's really just during the fighting. I think during the rest of the time, he takes more of his time with letting the characters' faces develop the emotions, if I can say it that way.
When you think Ridley Scott, you don't think actor, director, you think visionary guy. But, he's also directed smaller films where the acting really does shine. And it's kind of like if you've ever seen Matchstick Men, which is a quirky, comedic con man movie with Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell. Fantastic little movie. And you look at it and you go, wait, Ridley Scott directed this? There's no visual effects to speak of. It's not a big scope movie. And also like Thelma and Louise. Thelma and Louise is not a grand spectacle kind of movie. And there's really good acting in it. And, another movie with some great female characters. And, I've heard Comer is fantastic in this. There's probably going to be nominations abound. I've heard Affleck is terrific in this as well.
Well, let's talk about these folks a little bit. Ben Affleck, as the Lord in question, I call him a jolly Sybarite. He's all down for partying, man. That's his thing. and it's so great. It's a wonderful character. Matt Damon, usually plays Mr. Nice Guy in his film. He's the guy who's all nice and relatable and everything. In this one, he's quite different. He's a hardened warrior. He's very stoic. He doesn't let his emotions out very much. Very different from the way we're used to seeing him. Adam Driver is, well, what can you say? He's great in everything I've seen him in, playing this guy who's kind of sucking up to the Lord a little bit and thinking that his former friend is turning into this madman from jealousy. And Jodie Comer, oh my gosh, she has to play that rape scene twice and do it differently each time. And the way she does that is really something. Yeah, she's to sing. We saw her earlier this year in Free Guy, where it was a comedic role. So this is very different from that, and it's also very different from her role as Villeneuve on Killing Eve. So she's one to watch for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you have these guys who when you look at the other roles that they played. So you've got Ben Affleck, who is coming off of playing Batman.
Yeah.
You've got Matt Damon, who was Jason Bourne, and you've got Adam Driver, who was Kylo Ren. In those big movies, I don't think they get to do, like, there's a lot of action and stuff like that, and but you don't really get to see their acting chops. If you see Adam Driver in this or Marriage Story, there's a lot more there than sort of like a big Darth Vader villain or something like that. Although I think he's great as Kylo Ren as well.
He brings that skill to that role as well. Yeah.
Would you say it's a strong recommendation for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I am into costume dramas anyway, but this is like I say, it's 3 really great performances. And based on a true story. I mean, how can you go wrong?
I definitely see some accolades coming up early next year for this and nominations and stuff. My cynical side says that that's why they made this movie. I think all these people want some more gold on their mantle, and they said let's go for it. All right, so I'm going to move on. You mentioned Free Guy, so we'll talk about Free Guy a little bit. You saw this, I didn't. Ryan Reynolds, he thinks he's a bank teller, but he actually discovers that he is a non-player character in a video game. It's a really interesting premise. This is another movie that sat on a shelf and then finally came out this year. And I think it got some good reviews. What did you think of it?
I thought it was fun. It came out in the summer, which is perfect time because it's a perfect summer movie. It's light, it's funny. It's a great way to spend a couple of hours, getting out of the heat. A good date movie. It's interesting because the first time you see Ryan Reynolds, he's getting ready for work. He's in his apartment and he's, putting on his blue shirt because he's referred to as a lot as blue shirt guy. He wears the same blue shirt every day. And he goes off to work and he's in the bank and everything. And as he's on his way there, you start to notice weird things happening, like that car just changed color that's going along the street in the background. And oh, wait a minute, isn't that an explosion coming out of that building over there? What's going on? And yet he doesn't seem to notice it. And so you start thinking, wow, something's really weird here. And then, of course, it becomes apparent he's actually inside a video game. And there are the player characters, which are the people who are like us, going like this, And then there are the characters inside the game, which are the ones who are just walking around populating the place. And he's one of those. And he becomes aware. He receives an awareness of who he is.
What is the thing that sort of wakes him up? When does he become sentient?
His bank gets robbed every day. And he knows to expect it. He knows it's going to happen. It's no big deal. It just is something that happens every day. But the bank robber wears sunglasses. And the sunglass people are the people who are the avatars for the real people outside the game. And this one particular day, he's looking for his perfect woman. And every day he looks and he never sees her. And then one day there she is, but she's a sunglasses person and is Jodie Comer, or rather Jodie Comer's avatar inside the game. And so he thinks to himself, they're never supposed to talk to the sunglasses people, but he thinks, oh, I've got to talk to her. The only way I can do that is if I get some sunglasses. So but that day when his bank is robbed, he grabs them off the player's face and puts them on. And that is the trigger. Now, when he's got the sunglasses on, he can see all these things that he couldn't see before. Like here's the score thing up here that's racking up the scores. And here's something else over here, which these were not visible to him before. And so he starts to explore with the sunglasses and figures out what's going on.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of something like the Lego movie. You have your guy who wears the same thing. He does the same thing every day, doesn't know that he's being played with by in this case, it's a little boy. It's a reminiscent of something like Wreck-It Ralph, who like escapes a video game.
Is inside the video game. And the Truman Show.
Yeah.
because I mean, it rips off the ideas from a lot of movies.
It sounds fun, and you said that one thing that kind of surprised you is that it's very heavy on the love story.
Yeah. I mean, that's his whole purpose, is to find this woman that he has this great idea. He knows who she is. He knows what she looks like. And so when he sees her, he knows that she's the one. And then, turns out she's a real person, and he cannot exist outside the game. And so what happens then? But outside the game in real life, she's just a programmer. She's just kind of a nerdy girl. And the storyline has that she and this pal of hers have created this game, which is a game in which you build something. You build a society. It's not a shoot 'em game. It's not a violent game like the game that he's in. And this evil software giant company head by Taika Waititi steals their code, and she thinks the code is in this violent game, and she needs to have her avatar inside the game to find the proof inside the game. I don't know. Is that possible? I don't know. But that's the storyline. And so there's this also interaction between the real world and then the game world, as this plays out.
It sounds interesting. I'll check it out. I'm sure it'll be streaming very soon on one of the many, many streaming channels that we have now. I want to move on, though, because there's some stuff that came up on Netflix recently, and they're both in the realm of sports. So the first one, it's a docu-comedy, I would call it, directed by Billy Corben, and it deals with the investigation of Major League Baseball in the infamous doping scandal, which involved New York Yankees Alex Rodriguez. So, I guess if you were alive in the past 20 years, you know who Alex Rodriguez is. If you're a New Yorker, you really know who Alex Rodriguez is. And this was a lot of stuff that came to light that I did not know about. I knew that he was suspended. I knew that he went before a committee and he was fighting to appeal. I saw that side of it, but this actually deals with the doctor who supplied him with the drugs, supplied people like Manny Ramirez and some of these other prominent baseball players, like people that were kind of household names. So the storyline sounds very serious, the doping scandal, and like this stuff went to Congress. It was very serious. The doping in baseball and steroids in baseball is a big deal. The thing that they do that completely undercuts it and makes it so much more entertaining is they do these reenactments, but with kids. So they have these kids who look like, there's a kid who looks like A-Rod, there's a kid who looks like the doctor, all of these different people involved in the scandal. It's adorable, and the kids are wonderful, and they do it kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen Drunk History, but Drunk History is like somebody telling the history of something and they're drunk, and then they have the reenactors sort of lipping in their voice, so they lip sync, and they do the same thing here. So these people are telling the story, so you have an adult voice coming out of this little kid body who's made up to look like that person like with tattoos, or in the case of A-Rod, he's always like in a baseball uniform and got A-Rod's hairline and all this kind of stuff. It's just really delightful, and it actually came out back in 2018. I didn't see it till it was streaming on Netflix recently, and I just thought it was great. I just thought it was like a wonderful, cute little movie. A lot of it takes place in Florida, so down in Miami, which has its own kind of shade to it, but it's a lot of fun. And the other thing that I saw was a documentary series. This series deals with different sports. It's called Untold. I haven't seen the entire series, but they do an episode on Caitlyn Jenner. They do an episode on an incident called Malice at the Palace, which was a basketball riot that kind of happened in Detroit during a basketball game. The one that sort of hooked me was an episode called Deal with the Devil, which is about Christy Martin, who was a boxer. She was dynamite boxer. She did really, really well, and she was kind of putting a name and putting a face on women's boxing, which was not really a thing too much before she came along. And it deals with this amazing story that happened to her where she had this husband who was also her trainer. He turned out to be abusive and, later turns out to be a monster. In fact, if you don't know the story, you see the husband being interviewed and he's in prison. And you're like, okay, so what happened here? It's really great storytelling. It's very much like, I equate it to something like a Real Sports or some of the other sports documentaries that have happened recently. Very much like 30 for 30, which is an ESPN series. But this is sort of Netflix's version of that. And some of the other stories were Breaking Point about a tennis player called Marty Fish who was dealing with crippling anxiety. And then another one was about a minor league hockey team. It's called Crimes and Penalties. And it was basically about a minor league hockey team. It was mobbed up. This guy who owned a, trucking sanitation kind of business, as they used to say, he basically buys a hockey team for his kid, who's a big hockey fan. And they just have these guys, the more blood, the better, we'll pay you more money. There was a lot of like leg breaking, and it feels like it feels like you took, like the Mighty Ducks meets the Sopranos. And these guys, they could not be more real. They were really kind of like, I don't know if they just knew they were in a movie or they're like this all the time. You're like, are you guys auditioning for, the next Sopranos type series? But it's a lot. Some of the stories are a lot of fun, but I would definitely recommend that one as well, especially if you're into docuseries and, you're a big sports fan. But even if you're not a sports fan, I don't watch hockey and I'm not a huge basketball fan, but the stories were compelling enough that made me want to keep watching.
And it sounds like there are stories that you may not have heard about before either.
Yeah, I mean, that's why it's called Untold. I heard of Christy Martin, but I never knew this. And that story is really a gut punch shocker, and it's really told well. So I definitely recommend those two bits if you can find them streaming. I think Untold will still be on Netflix. Not sure about Screwball. But anyway, we got to wrap up. Maribeth, thanks so much. It's great having you. We'll hope to have you back and talk about some more movies. And of course, if you want to see more of our content and especially read some of these reviews, because the written reviews come out long before we actually talk about them. So you can find some of Maribeth's and our other movie reviews on our website, norestfortheweekendpodcast.com. Don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And now you can subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/getbehindtherabbit. I'd like to thank Maribeth Thueson for coming out and talking with me again today. And I also want to give a big shout out and thanks to our sponsor, JMR Rentals. For Behind the Rabbit Productions, I'm Jason Godbey. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.